The Developer's Pandemic Survival Guide, Burnout and Stress, with Peter McKee.
Thanks, everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about dealing with stress and burnout in tough times. And so I lead up the developer relations team at Docker. We're a huge team right now of me, myself, and I. But and you can follow me on Twitter at pmckee. And I didn't put my LinkedIn there, but a lot of folks are reaching out on LinkedIn. It seems to be a good platform. But anyways, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn also. Okay. So like was mentioned earlier, I have a large family. I have 7 children. My wife, of course, we have a dog and a cat, and we're just going and going and going, right? I have a 23-year-old who's married now. So I have a son-in-law also, all the way down to a 3-year-old. So we're extremely busy. And then, of course, I work at Docker. Like I said before, I'm a team of 1. So I'm doing a lot of live streaming, all the demands of work. Then layer on top of that financial demands, medical demands. That's me lying in the bed there with the doctors laughing at me. And then, I mean, the breakup of the prince and princess. All right, maybe you guys don't care as much as me. But then layer on top of that, the global pandemic, right? What a crazy year. Stuck at home. A lot of anxiety and stress over, is this ever going to get back to normal? What does normal look like? Right. So all these things layered on top of each other are very, very stressful. And so when we kind of walk through some of this, so stress is really at the heart of it, right? And stress leads to overwhelm, which leads to burnout. And stress, I took this off of Psychology Today. Don't beat me up on that reference, but I thought it was a good definition. So it refers to 2 things. Stress refers to 2 things: the psychological perception of pressure, right? So your mental thinking around pressure on the one hand, and then your body's response to it, all the way from your metabolism to your muscles and to your memory, your cognitive abilities, right? You start to feel it all through your body, right? I don't know for you, but for me, I feel a lot of stress in my stomach. When I first started speaking to larger crowds, I usually fast during the day and eat at night. So I'm on an empty stomach, but the stress and the nerves would tighten up my stomach and actually twist it and turn it and topple it, right? Your body is in your consciousness is spread throughout your body, right? Your nervous system, your intelligence is spread throughout your body and connected to your metabolism, to your muscles. I'm also an MMA fan, which is like boxing and wrestling combined. And it's a very stressful sport to watch. And I catch myself tightening up as I watch it, right? And getting more stress, even though I'm not participating in the activity. And stress leads to overwhelm. And overwhelm is just the building up and accumulation of stress over a period of time. And that kind of moves into your head and you're trying to deal with everything that is going on at once, right? And it starts to become overwhelming. And then overwhelm leads into burnout. And a burnout's a state of emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion, right? It's usually associated with work. And some of the indicators of burnout are physical and mental exhaustion, a sense of dread of work, feelings of cynicism and anger and irritability, right? And I know we've all felt this. I know I've felt this at some different places where I've worked at. Definitely not Docker. I love going to Docker, but you just wake up and just dread going to work, the stress and then the overwhelm. And now it's kind of gotten to that point where it's lingering on, possibly even some depression, right? Where you just don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to go into work. You don't want to fight with your boss and your coworkers, and you get angry and you're cynical about everything, right? And so these just kind of compound and they build up over time. And to me, stress is the root cause, right? It's really what drives into overwhelm and then into burnout. So if we can learn some techniques and tactics to deal with stress and try and catch it as early as possible, then hopefully we can mitigate the overwhelm and burnout. And whoops, clicked away here. And so I believe the biggest part of this, it all comes down to your relationships, right? Your relationships with your spouse or your partner, your children, dependents, pets, extended family, parents, brothers and sisters, friends and coworkers. We have a ton of relationships out there in the world. And since we're humans, we're very tribal, we're very relationship based, right? And a lot of stress comes from our relationships. So although on the surface, a problem at work that's causing you stress really kind of lays at that relationship you either have with, your team lead or your manager or a project manager. People, the relationship there isn't solid enough. And I'm going to talk about how you build that in a second, right? And it's causing you stress. So while you might feel like I'm getting too much work to do in a week's time, right? And that's what's stressing me out. But that usually leads to, I can't talk to my boss, right? I can't tell him that I feel like overwhelmed. I feel like he's going to think I'm not doing good, right? Which then leads on to more stress. And I feel like my boss is only focused on getting things done, right? And all these type of things. So without a good relationship with your boss, being able to go and talk to him about these things is tough, and it just builds up the stress. And so to kind of start talking about relationships and how you approach these relationships, right? It's personality and temperament are some really good tools to start understanding yourself. And then once you start understanding yourself, you start to see these aspects in coworkers, friends, family, those type of things. And there's a lot of different personality tests out there, temperament tests. Some of them are great. Some of them are just total trash. I think the big five model is the best. It's the most psychometrically tested, using scientific practices and principles. And it's pretty repeatable, right? So if you take the big five test today, and in 2 years from now, you take it, it's going to be really close, really, really close. And so there's 5 aspects to that. And that's openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And I'm not going to dive too deep into this, and this isn't a talk around personality, but again, it gives you a good foundation, a good tool of understanding yourself, and then starting to understand others and understand their position and where they're coming from, right? How they think, right? So real quickly, so openness is, and these are on the higher levels. So what the big five does is it ranks you kind of on a scale on these 5 aspects. So openness, you can either be higher openness, medium openness, right? Or low openness, or medium low openness on all of these, right? So these are describing the higher end of each one of these aspects. So with openness, there you have creativity, you're intellectually curious, imagination, adventurousness, appreciative arts, abstract thinking, open to new experiences. And low openness would be the opposite. Conscientiousness, this is a kind of a tricky one, but it's dutifulness, attention to detail, discipline, consistency, cleanliness, adherence to rules, and extroversion, introversion. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with this. And a lot of times in the other tests and scales, you're either extroverted or introverted. And that's really not how it works, right? You're on a scale. So I consider myself a little bit more introverted, but I'm definitely, I'm an outgoing introvert, right? So I like to talk to people and interact, but it's to a certain point, right? Agreeableness is kindness, cooperation, sympathy, politeness, trust, compliance. I'm very high on agreeableness, right? So I won't immediately be aggressive and defiant against somebody. I usually kind of agree. I'm polite, those type of things. And then the neuroticism. And these are all the negative emotions around anger, depression, fear, worry, anxiety. We all have those, of course, right? But people that are higher in neuroticism, those come a lot quicker to them, a lot faster to them. Those that are low on neuroticism, it takes a little bit while to build up to those. And so I think once you start to understand yourself and then can start to understand others, you start to build relationships through empathy, right? And empathy is a buzzword that's now in our industry, but empathy really means understanding, right? You're not trying to sympathize. You're not trying to feel what the other person's feeling. You're trying to understand what the other person is thinking or feeling or where they're coming from, right? And a lot of that has to do with their temperament. how they stand in the world, right? So someone who's very low on agreeableness, and let's say he's your team lead, right? And you have an idea because you're high on openness, right? And you always want to try new things and you want to add new functions and libraries. And every time you talk to your team lead about it, they're, no, why are we going to do that? It works the way it works, right? So they're low on agreeableness. So it's almost immediate no, an intense discussion, and possibly even low on openness, right? So they're not open as you are to new experiences, new frameworks, new ideas, right? Hey, it works. No, let's stick with what we got, right? And that could lead you to feel like, I'm not being listened to. My ideas aren't being taken into account. I'm just pushed away, pushed aside, right? And that can bring stress to you. You could have that something could possibly help, but things start to build up. You start to feel overwhelmed. They don't listen to me. No one's going to hear me, right? I hate this job. No one likes my ideas. So just a quick example of how these temperament and personality play into each other. And if you're trying to build a relationship with other person, you can also start to see how they stand, right? So low on agreeableness, low on openness, right? And understand, okay, they're not just being a jerk. This is just who they are at their core. They're not a bad person. They're not a jerk, right? It's just the way they kind of initially view the world. It's their lens, right? And then therefore you can work on that, right? You can work knowing each other's temperaments at a high level, right? Not super specific, but you get these feelings from each other. And then you can work towards building mutual trust, right? So a good relationship has mutual trust in it. And what I mean trust is you, and I should have changed this to we. So you trust each other to do what you say you're going to do. It's a big part of trust, right? So I say I'm going to be home at 5 to my spouse. I'd be home at 5. If I'm home at 15 after, I might be, a little more, on conscientiousness. I might be like, not as high, right? 5:15 is the same as 5 to me, but to my wife, 5 o'clock, 5:01, you're late, right? And so if you start trying to build trust and do what you say you're going to do, that builds trust through others, right? And then you start to trust each other, and you know that you're going to be empathetic to each other's thoughts and feelings, right? And this kind of flows into commitment, right? So you have a commitment to each other, and in a professional setting, I'm not talking about a deep personal commitment to each other, but a commitment to each other to do the best for the relationship and for the company and for the team, right? And if you have that commitment to each other, that, hey, if I come and have a hard conversation with you, I know that this person is committed to our relationship and committed to our team, and knows that I'm not just want to be a jerk and have a hard conversation with somebody, but it's to do it better, right? And that brings some safety to you. And then you start to both take ownership for the relationship, right? You start to shift your perspective from it's this other person to, well, I want to be responsible for this relationship and make things work. And so I'm committed to it, and I'm going to try and find a solution, right? So jumping into some tactics and techniques here, and I'm going to go pretty quick through these just so we can, because Don has a talk to, but I want to be conscious of time. But so 3 main techniques, tactics I wanted to talk about. And the first one's, I call it detached, and that talks about what is true. And we'll get to that in a second. And then setting up a routine. And then this last one is the 3x3 plus a question. And so in a routine, you want to do some of the basics, right? Set up a clear start and stop times for your workday. That brings consistency to you, right? And it's not so much for your boss and your coworkers know when you're going to be there and when you're going to leave. That's part of it. But it's also for you, right? And especially at working at home. And I won't go into a whole lot of stuff from being forced to work at home, because Don has a great talk after this. But it gives you consistency. I know I'm going to start at 9, I'm going to end at 6, right? And I'm going to do that every day. And the people that are outside that in your home and your relationships, they know that, right? And now you don't have to be, super strict on this, depending on your personality and where you are. Be flexible, of course, but try to be consistent, right? And that helps lower your stress. And then understand how you work, right? And how much work you can actually do in 40 hours a week, right? And I'm going to specifically talk to the software engineers out there. They're estimating their tasks. That's the hardest part of your job. No one works and codes 8 hours a day. It's just, you just can't. You really probably get between 4 and, if you're lucky, 6, but typically 4, right? Because of meetings, Slack messages, one-off conversations, lunch with coworkers, time to research and study, right? All those things, right? It's very hard to work 40 hours a week. So when you're estimating, you want to understand how much work you can actually do in a week and only commit to what you can actually do. And then I think these are, if you only get anything out of today, out of my talk, I hope that you get these things that you can add to your routine, right? So exercise and diet. And you should be exercising and diet and watching your diet as much as possible. Exercise is important, like I mentioned before, right? Your whole body, we're just not a brain that's attached to bones and flesh, right? Our nervous system, our consciousness, our intelligence is distributed throughout our body. And so moving your body, exercising your body is very helpful. It reduces stress. It gets you out of your head. And just start small, right? Take a 2-minute walk. Stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down, doing some squats, right? Do what you can and build up. And then focus on your diet too. Food is your fuel. Bad stuff in, you get bad stuff out, right? You wouldn't put sugar into your gas tank of your car, right? It doesn't run on sugar. It runs on gas, right? Same thing with your body. Put good, clean foods into your body. I like to tell people, just think about when you're going to eat something, think in the back of your mind, is this going to fuel my body or is it going to drag me down? And believe me, I love dragging myself down with a big full meal. It's one of the best pleasures for me in life, right? But during the day, I try and eat very, very good to give myself good, healthy fuel. This is key to me. Your exercise and diet raises your capacity to do things, to your ability to be able to do things and perform during the day, especially what we do as knowledge workers, right? Deep work. Having good fuel and exercising your body will 10x your capacity. Meditation is one of my favorite things, one of the best things you can do. And in this context, I'm not talking about meditation in spiritual or religious type of worldview, and that's totally fine. But here it's more about exercising your brain. And just real quickly, I'll go through it. So you want to sit down, set your timer for 5 minutes, set it for 1 minute, just start, right? Take a couple deep breaths, close your eyes, and then focus on your breath. You want to focus on your breath, either the rising and falling of your chest, the rising and falling of your stomach, the air coming in and out of your nose. Focus on that and count, right? And what will happen is you'll get to 1, 2, and then your mind will wander and you'll start thinking about that task you got to do for the day, that unit test you didn't write, that conversation you had with your wife over coffee that just kind of irritated you. And what you want to do is just notice that, don't judge it, and just come back to your breath. And what that's doing is training your mind to see your thoughts, see your distractions, catch them, and bring you back to focus. It'll help in conversations with other people. That comment, that snide comment that you want to make, that rude and mean comment you want to make to someone else that's in your brain, the more you meditate, the gap between that thought and actually coming out of your mouth widens and you're able to catch it, right? And then the next one is gratitude. I love this practice. It's very simple and it ties into kind of journaling. So I like to do it at night, just in my journal. I just write down 3 things I'm grateful for. And the key here is to really, really think and feel that thing that you're grateful for, right? So, and it can be as simple as the flowers in your garden, right? I live in a little bit of a wooded area. We got a beautiful trees behind us with a creek. And, I try and feel myself sitting there and feeling, seeing the trees in the forest, right? And really enjoying that, right? Really being grateful for it. That'll do wonders for your stress and your spirit, right? And sometimes, honestly, sometimes I just write down 3 things, just like I've had a rough day, but I'm going to write these things down. I'm going to try my best. Doesn't always get there, but it's the consistency over time with meditation, gratitude, and exercise. And then journaling has changed my life. Just do 5 minutes free writing. I'm going to go a little bit faster here. Sorry, I'm looking at the time. Just grab your notebook. I usually do it in the morning and just free write. Set your timer 5 minutes. I usually do 20. Don't start out that. Start 1 minute, 2 minutes, and just start writing. If you don't know what to write, I don't know what I need to write. I don't have anything to talk about today. And just keep going. Keep your pen on that paper and just write. Your subconscious will bring things to your mind, and you can write about them. You'll write about your problems. You'll write about what you want to achieve in your life, your relationships, and it'll help bring clarity to your life. Real quick, I want to run through this technique because it kind of ties a little bit together here. So is that true? This is my favorite. It's maybe more technically called detaching, right? But I like the phrase, is it true? And I use this constantly. Not always the best. I actually just used it this morning with my wife. We were having an argument over the baby was up early. She was getting him. I was getting ready. He wasn't fed. My 3-year-old goes nuts if he's not eaten yet. Right. And of course, it irritated it. It triggered me. And we had an interesting conversation, but I had to stop myself. So you're kind of going along through life, and all of a sudden something happens. Right. You have an inciting incident, as they say in movies, right? In script writing. Something happens, something triggers you, irritates you, bothers you, a situation that you got to go into. And what happens, our minds start going down this spiral of horrible things, right? God, I can't stand work. I can't stand my boss. He never listens to me. That coworker never, takes into consideration my ideas. He just blows me off. Whatever it is, it starts spinning in your mind, and you start going down into the pit, into the darkness. And what you want to do as quickly as possible around in between these first two arrows, hopefully. And as the better you get better at this, the more it comes up to the top of the circle, is you want to ask yourself, is that true? Right? Does my boss really not listen to me? Does he not care? Does he not want me on the team? Well, that doesn't really seem true, right? Well, I wouldn't be here. We would be having conversations around my performance, and we're not having those. Or it could be true, right? He doesn't think I'm performing well. I'm not doing what I say I'm going to do, right? And therefore, you should look at, well, what's my part in that? Do I have a part in this, right? How have I caused this, and how can I handle this, right? How can I approach this? And when things get really, really heated, when you're just angry, mad, upset, right? Change your location, get out of your brain and get into your body, right? So go for a walk, do some push-ups, some jumping jacks, go to the restroom and throw some cold water on your face. That's one of my favorites. Put some cold water on your face. Just moving, getting out, it takes you out of your brain and gives you a second to breathe and to think, right? And then you're going to go back and you're going to build that relationship through empathy, right? You're going to have that hard conversation with whoever it is, right? An honest, hard conversation with them. And you're going to voice your opinions and how you're feeling, how you see the situation in an open way, right? That you're committed to the relationship and you want to build trust, right? And so go have those hard conversations. They're hard to do in the moment. They're stressful. The anxiety is high. But usually, if you have someone else on the side that's also trying to build a relationship and cares and is committed, right? They will come to that conversation as same as you, right? And you can move forward into a compromise or into a solution. And that levels you up a little bit. And then this cycle is going to start over again, but hopefully you step and keep going up, right? And that helps lift your mood, reduce stress, reduce overwhelm, and hopefully burnout. The last thing I want to talk about here real quick is a 3x3 plus a question, right? So I went really fast through a lot of things. And you kind of might be thinking, well, where do I get started? Or what's the main, I got so much going on in my life, right? My wife is sick. My kids are at school, at college, but they're really not going to college, and I got to pay for it. And it's kind of stressing me financially. Work isn't the greatest, right? You have, where do I start? And I stole this from Jordan Peterson, but it definitely helps for sure. Either first thing in the morning or last thing at night, sit down on your bed. I like to do it in the morning. Sit down on your bed, take a couple, 3 deep breaths, hold them for 3, blow out for 3. Just calm your nervous system and your mind. And then close your eyes and ask yourself a question. What do I know I should be doing that I'm not doing? Right? What do I know I need to fix that I'm not fixing? What's that conversation I know I have to have that I'm not having? Right? and attack that first. Your body knows, your mind knows, it'll tell you, right? It knows the number one thing you need to work on. So if you calm your mind, calm your body, and ask yourself that question, that weird thing that your consciousness is, or the observer, right, is going to tell you. And then take it from there, and then really attack that.